Happy Easter to you. Welcome to my garden on this Easter day. It's very early in the morning, so I'm trying to keep my voice down so the neighbours don't get annoyed and wake up. We just heard 10 readings. 10 readings which place all of this into the big picture. 10 readings which take us through the history of everything, from the beginning of creation and how God made everything, then through the story of the flood and how God promised by giving the rainbow that he would never ever let destruction take place. And that's particularly poignant at the moment because of the number of rainbows that the children are making at the moment. And then in the next reading we have this glimpse ahead at the cost that was going to come for God to preserve his creation and renew it. And then we come to the fourth reading, the book of Exodus, and the story of how God overcomes sort of industrial injustice in the form of the Egyptian oppression of the Israelites and how he uses his power to overcome that. The fifth reading from Isaiah is a reading in which Isaiah calls us to continue to trust in God, that God is still able, in spite of everything, to act in a positive way. And the sixth reading is from the book of Proverbs. This is the reading in which wisdom is personified as a woman setting up her house with a wonderful meal so that everybody can enjoy the fruits of knowledge, the fruits of understanding, the fruits of wisdom. The seventh and eighth readings from Ezekiel go together. They're about the giving of the Spirit that wells up within us, giving us life in the face of death and transforming dried up old dead things into new and living things. And finally, from the Old Testament, the ninth reading, the eighth reading, it's the ninth reading, is from Zephaniah, and you have this image of everybody together, irrespective of who they are, knowing wisdom, knowing God, having the Spirit, knowing joy, being able to be confident in the face of the world around us. And then moving into the New Testament, we have this new covenant, this new thing that completes the old ones, the covenant in creation, the covenant with Noah, the covenant with Moses, that God agrees to look after us and transform us and bring us back to himself. And in the New Testament we have the completion of that because of the blood of the covenant, the blood of his only Son. And that brings us to the Easter story in the 10th reading, when the women go to the empty tomb and he's just not there, and he's risen from the dead. That's the story. It's the big story, and this last week we've gone into the minutiae of the suffering and the steps that brought us to this place, right down to the very last things that Jesus said from the cross before he died. Because taking time over the pain and the suffering means that we can bring all that today for God to transform. I'm in my garden and we've got our little Easter eggs hanging up on the trees. It's a German tradition, and it's a bit of fun. And there's a sense in which, because of the nature of Easter, that it takes seriously the pain and the suffering and the injustice and the hurt, that God takes that, transforms it, solves it, relieves it, whatever other words you want to use, which actually we can still know fun, joy. We can still enjoy ourselves without pretending that the bad things don't happen, because they do happen. And it's because of our experience of those that the Easter joy is so much greater. When we know pain, when we know death, when we know injustice, feeling that transformed by God in this mysterious process that is what Easter is all about, makes our joy absolutely complete. Years ago, I was the Dean's volunteer at St George's Cathedral in Jerusalem, and I was there for a year, from 1987 to 1988. And during that year, when Easter came round, I was able to experience the wonderful celebrations in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And the thing that struck me about that particular site is it's the one site that I am confident is the place that the events happened. Within it, you've got the place where the cross was and the place where Jesus was buried. And the reason why I'm confident is because of an accident of history. Jesus predicted the destruction of Jerusalem, and indeed it did take place in 70 AD, about 40 years after he died and rose again. And it was destroyed by the Romans, who 65 years after that built a new city on the place called Aelia Capitolina. And what they wanted to do was destroy all memory of Christianity. And so they said to the locals, right, okay, where was Jesus buried? Where was he crucified? And they said, well, it was over there. And they basically built a massive temple to Jupiter, a big platform with a temple on top of it to Jupiter, in order to try and obliterate from all history and from all memory anything to do with Jesus. But what they actually did was they preserved the memory. So 200 years later, when Constantine's mother Helen turns up and says, right, where's the place where Jesus was crucified? The locals were able to say, well, it's underneath that temple over there. And so they dug it up, and the story goes they found a bit of the cross and they found the place where Jesus was buried. And Constantine built a church on that place. And the remains of that church, the big pillars, are what are still inside the Church of the Resurrection today. So because of the tragedy that the first generation of Christians experienced, the destruction and then the building of this temple, you and I can, in ordinary circumstances, go to Jerusalem and see the place where Jesus died and was buried and rose again. Now, I share that with you because we in our generation are being asked a big question. Are we able to look after our planet? We've heard so much about the creation in the readings today. Are we able to look after this planet so that our children, our children's children, and our children's children's children can live safely? There is a real problem, and we have got to make the sacrifices now so that people who are yet to be born can live. The only way in which we can do that is knowing that our sacrifices are worth it. So we come back to Jesus. We have this hope within us that God can transform even death, even dried up old bones, even injustice, even despondency and despair. He can take all of that and he can turn it into something new. My hope and prayer this Easter, as we face a pandemic that has killed thousands of people, is that we can renew that confidence that God is very much in control, very much wants goodness to take place, and will look after each of us as individuals as well as communities, that his love is so strong that he can break the bonds of death itself, and that our lives therefore have meaning. Last week I read to you the reading from Ecclesiastes, and the writer says, it's all pointless, it's all meaningless. And there's a sense in which, if you look at the world in one way, it's pointless. But if you look at it in this new way, there's purpose, there's meaning. Yes, we're all going to die, we're all going to grow old and get ill. It happens. But our lives have meaning. They have some sense of continuity, not only with the past and with God's saving acts of the past, but also with what is to come. We can face what is to come with confidence, with joy, because we can act now, and our children's children will bless us for what we do. Happy Easter. Amen.